Thank you for joining us on this episode of Legal Angle with Emmanuel, the law Olawale. I have with me today a special guest, a friend, a colleague, a magistrate of the Court of Common Pleas, Domestic and Juvenile Division, the Franklin County Court of Common Pleas in Ohio. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, we have Mike McAllister. Yeah, before we start the show, I would like to acknowledge the sacrifices of those who have died, shed their blood for the freedom that people like me and you and others in the United States enjoy. Some people had to sacrifice so that we can continue the pursuance of the American dream. Thank you for those and for the families of those who have died or shed their blood or have sacrificed their lives. We thank you. Again, welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you. And I as well, Emmanuel, want to thank all those who sacrificed for us to have the freedoms we have here today. So thank you all, those who served and for those who lost people.
Yeah. Today we want to talk about the juvenile system. I mean, the justice system, how juveniles are treated within the system. But before we go ahead with that, I would like you to at least give us a brief introduction of yourself so that people can know who you are.
Thank you. My name is Mike McAllister. I am currently a magistrate in the juvenile court system in Franklin County. I've been on the bench for about 5.5 years. Prior to that, I was a prosecuting attorney in the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office for several years. Then I moved on to private practice and was a private attorney for several years before becoming a magistrate in the Franklin County court system. A little bit about my history of upbringing. I'm the youngest of 5 children to a single parent mother. We grew up not having much, honestly. At times we were on the public assistance. At times we had problems keeping our utilities on and working. My mother worked hard to try to make sure we had the things we needed. But as anyone who's a single parent knows, it's not always easy, especially with 5 children. At one point in my life, all 3 of my older brothers, they were in the justice system, and none of them were lawyers. My sister, who is a middle child, she was a parent at a very young age. At around 15 years of age, she was a parent. And at one point, my mother had issues herself, so I went to live with my uncle and aunt, and I was in their custody. I could have easily been into the juvenile system and the foster care system, but my uncle and aunt took me in, raising as one of their own from the time I was a teenager until the time I went off to college. So I just think with all that, my background, personal background, and my legal background being all sides of the courtroom, I just believe I'm a well-rounded person to be sitting here today speaking to you all. So thank you, Emmanuel.
Yeah, thank you. You have a very compelling life story. We'll go over that in the course of the program. What inspired you to become a lawyer?
I've always been a people person. I like being around people. I like trying to help people. So when I was at a point where I wasn't sure where my career path would take me, I was considering actually being a teacher and a lawyer. I thought about both those as career paths because both of those careers are something that I have always thought were important and they help people. In the end, I ended up going into the legal direction. I have a cousin who had just become an attorney, so he inspired me to go into law as well.
Awesome. Knowing you, I've known you since you were in law school. We're in law school around the same time. You've always been this serious dude. What was the secret of that? Because I look at you, I'm like, wow, this guy is serious. Always business.
Well, I am business a lot of times, but I also, Emmanuel, I have a goofy side. You see me, a lot of people see me from the legal side where I'm a magistrate and I've been a prosecutor and a trial attorney, but I'm pretty goofy at times. When you sit down with me and I let my hair down and we're just relaxing. I love to laugh. Um, so I'm not always serious. It's,
Like even
sometimes I
yeah,
can be serious.
being serious itself is a compliment from coming from me, though. You know, you carry yourself with dignity and respect, and you're an honorable guy. So,
Thank you.
and yeah, you were the first person to go to college in your immediate and extended family. What was that experience like?
I don't know what to expect, honestly. Uh, when I was younger, I didn't know people went to college. I didn't know anything about college. So once I went to my high school, I started learning, meeting new friends who a lot of people had college aspirations, but I had no idea about that. So I started getting more involved and trying to learn about colleges. And eventually I went to a program that prepared people like myself who didn't have the background to know things about college. It prepares you to start believing that you can go to college. So through that, I did college visits. I had a couple of friends who I met who a little bit older than me who went to college. I went and visited them, and at that point, I was thinking that I can do this. And I've always been, even when I was younger, I was in a lot of the programs in school for the gifted and talented, as you say, the intelligent children. So I was into those type of schooling, but I still didn't know a lot about higher education.
Hmm. Wow, that is interesting because the reality of life is that you desire what you can see. And a lot of people, especially people in that come from communities of color, you don't get to see professionals. I remember going into one middle school a few years ago, and that was the first time that those kids are seeing an attorney who looks like them. So I can understand that journey. And also, going through your life story, you said your elder brother was in contact with the justice system when he was a juvenile. What was that like for you, growing in an environment where you have your elder brother in the justice system and not as a lawyer or a judge or
Well,
a
my
probation
three
officer?
older brothers, it was
Okay.
all three of my older brothers. And when they were in the system, I honestly only saw from the side where, they were being punished for the things they did. So I didn't really know about the other side as far as, what actually the judge did, what the lawyers do, what all three sides of the courtroom, how they all intertwine and work together. I had no idea about that because I was the youngest of five. I just saw that my brothers had issues where they were going through the system and being on house arrest, things of that nature. So I was still didn't understand what was going on when they were in trouble. So it was still new to me, even myself, getting more and more involved in the legal system. I learned a lot that I didn't really understand previously.
Hmm. Did their experience inspire or affect you thinking of going into the legal system as an officer of the law?
When I was younger, I didn't really think about it in that way. But as I get older, I think I realized that their experiences have always kind of molded me to become who I am. I see what they went through. I see other people who, that from your neighborhood or from your school who go through these things and you don't really understand it. And a lot of times they don't understand it, being young people who have never had these type of interactions and are not given that guidance. So I think it is important for people such as myself and yourself to uh, help inspire the people from our communities and to educate them on how the legal system works so they can be more involved in their own, when and if they do have issues with the law, they can have a better understanding of the process.
Yes. And then you were raised by a single mother who had four other children. You are the youngest of the five children. You lived in a housing project or what you can call a lower class housing. What was that like for you growing up in such an environment? Did you at that age ever think you'll become an attorney?
I have no idea I'd be an attorney. I didn't know what I would be doing in my life. I didn't know any doctors. I didn't know any lawyers. I didn't know any professionals. Only thing I knew were people who were trying to live day by day and to not have their utilities cut off, to make sure they had enough food for their children to eat. That's the environment that I grew for most of my life. My mom struggled. She hustled. She did what she could to make sure that, try to make sure we had food and that we had hot water to shower the next day and we have lights to do our homework. Um, so it was very tough growing up. We moved a lot because, if we couldn't pay a bill in one place, we would try to move to another place and have a fresh start. So it was tough. I think, I grew up not having a lot of really close friends as a younger child because, I would start getting close to people and then we moved to a new location and I start all over. And a lot of times, sometimes there's not children. Well, I'll put it this way. At one point in time, I was the only person of color in an entire school system. And I vividly remember that there's nobody there who looked like me.
Yeah, that was quite an experience. So it was more about surviving day to day. There was no plan for the future, because there was no opportunity to plan for the future. You just have to survive.
Exactly. You learn to make sure you can survive this day and wake up the next day and survive again.
You grew up with a family that needed welfare and public assistance. What are your thoughts on these public assistance programs? Was it, because it's become something like of a sore topic, but some people need, a lot of people need them to be able to stay afloat, and some people believe that people should not get help. What are your thoughts on that situation, especially being someone who grew up in a family that needed that?
I think if we didn't have public assistance, we wouldn't have eaten sometimes. So it's very important. Everyone needs help sometime. I don't care who you are or what you have. At some point in your life, you have needed or have gotten help. Nobody gets to where they are in their lives without someone else, helping prop them up at some point in time. So as far as the welfare system itself, people need help. And whether it's a welfare system or some other system that is put in place, there needs to be a system where people can get assistance because, like I said, someone is always down on their luck at some point in their lives. And I think it's incumbent upon us as a society to make sure people don't fall through the cracks.
Thank you, because no person is an island. We all kind of depend on each other to survive, really. And
Correct.
talking about the juvenile criminal, or where we can call it criminal, the justice system, according to the ACLU, at least, we have nearly 60,000 youth under the age of 18 are incarcerated in the system or prisons in the United States every day. They're removed from family, school, society because they violated one law or the other. And you have been a magistrate of a court that sees, that is part of the system for 5 years. How does the system really work? Is it um, is it meant to be punitive, or is it meant to rehabilitate?
The juvenile justice system in Franklin County, the stated goal is to rehabilitate the children, to reform them so they can go out and become productive society, citizens of society. We're not trying to punish people. That's not the stated goal. That should not be the goal. And of late, there has been a push to really involve because we've learned through study that the more people are involved in the justice system, the more they debate or have system. So,
Okay. Yeah, can you educate, the public about why juvenile offenders are not labeled criminals?
yes, because they're juvenile and they're not age majority yet. So the juvenile system is basically civil, not the criminal system, even though their laws mirror the criminal system. They don't have the same punishment or possible consequences because we all realize that these are children, and they, most part, they need guidance and resources more than anything. So the goal, once again, is to rehabilitate, reform, not punish, because we are talking about.
Give me a second. Sorry about that interruption. So, talking about the justice system regarding juveniles, if let's assume that a youth offender gets convicted of whatever violations, they get penalized. Is this going to be on their record forever, or is it something they can expunge, or is it something that is it something that goes away when they turn 18, or is it's going to be with them forever?
A common misconception is that once you turn 18, everything in your juvenile record magically disappears. That is not the case. First of all, juvenile court system has jurisdiction over a person until they're 21. So if you commit a crime under the age of 18, you can be a part of the juvenile justice system until you're 21 years of age. So there's not a magic 18, I'm free. Secondly, if you have a record on your juvenile, in the juvenile system, that does just not go away either. You can file to have that sealed and expunged. It's usually a pretty simple process. And once you file to have that sealed and expunged, it's a pretty simple process unless you have continued to build your record into your later teen and adulthood. Then it's not so easy. You can either, a judge or magistrate can either look at your record and grant the sealing or expunging, or they can request a hearing and discuss it with the person, and the prosecutor's opportunity to weigh in as well, and to determine if they believe it's best for this person to have their record sealed and expunged. So there's a process, but usually if you're a juvenile and you have a juvenile record and you go on to become a productive citizen, which we all hope happens, then most times a judge or magistrate will really consider sealing and expunging your record. But we want you to be able to go out and get a job and continue to be productive. We're not trying to hold people back.
Yeah, in a situation where, let's say, someone commits a violation as a juvenile and they get convicted of it, but then they live several years without committing any crime, then as an adult, they commit similar crime. Can the adult court use the record from the juvenile system to, let me say, can the prosecutor use the record from the juvenile system to prove their case, saying that this person has a pattern, that they've done it before? Or is that record not going to be available?
They can look at it, but they can't use it to prove that you committed the crime as an adult. They may use it once as a plea, or you're found guilty of a crime. They may say, then it's a pattern using your juvenile stuff, but it cannot be used as proof. And that's why once you become an adult and you have a juvenile record, you probably should entertain trying to get it sealed and expunged. So not that it doesn't come back to haunt you if you continue doing crimes, but if you want to get different jobs, you want to go into military, something like that, they want to see that you don't have a record, and that's why you want to try to get those things sealed and expunged so they can't come back to haunt you in your future.
Thank you. And why are some juveniles tried as adults when in fact they're still just kids? Their age will still be under the age of 21 or 18, but some of them are tried as adults.
That is when the crime is labeled a serious crime. If you sometimes like aggravated robbery, that's a highest level felony with maybe a gun specification, and the juveniles are a certain age that they don't believe that the juvenile system can rehabilitate them at that point in time, then the prosecutor can file a motion to try to get the transfer to the adult division. They still come to the juvenile court, and the juvenile judges have hearings to determine if it's appropriate to keep the child in the juvenile system where they can still be helped and rehabilitated, or if they don't believe that can happen, that's when they transfer to the adult division, and then that case basically becomes an adult case, even though the person is under the age of 18.
Okay. And in a situation like that, when a kid is tried in adult court and they get convicted of that crime, do they go to the juvenile detention center or do they go to adult prison?
A lot of times I go to the adult prison, but some of the times the adult prisons have it cordoned off. They don't have a child who's in the adult system in the population with the adult prisoners because that would be unsafe.
Yeah, is there any program for rehabilitation short of incarceration? What are those programs that we have in place in Franklin County?
To try to rehabilitate and incarcerate?
To reform instead of incarcerating.
One thing that happened in juvenile court recently, they did an overhaul of the probation department. It's not called probation anymore, where formerly probation was a list of rules that once you get put on probation, every child has the same list of rules they'd have to adhere to. Now it's called the Juvenile Community Enrichment Services, where they have specialists who are assigned to the children. And if once you committed a crime where you may have gone on probation in the past, you go on community supervision with the specialist, and they design a program in conjunction with the child and the family and all the different agencies that the child's involved with. If there's like children's services involvement or any kind of other agency involvement, then they try to create a program that the child is involved in helping create to try to help rehabilitate the child. And that can look a lot of different ways depending on the child and the child's circumstances. So it's not just a blanket page anymore where you do this crime, these are the things you must do to be on probation. It's more of a collaborative along with everyone involved, all the stakeholders in that child's life.
Okay. Is mentorship part of that program or?
Excuse me?
Mentorship.
Mentorship, it can be. Mentorship is always something that we consider. I think it's incumbent upon us to look at the mentorship, especially for children who, like myself, who had a single mother, who I didn't have a lot of adult role models. I have my older brothers, but once again, sometimes they were involved in the system. So I think mentorship is very important, and I order it sometimes. I think a lot of the juvenile judicial officials order mentorship as a part of the process. Part of the problem is that a lot of times there aren't enough mentors out there sometimes. You're still looking for a mentor. So I know they can always use more mentors, and I would hope that the general public would want to mentor our children to help them become, better, well-rounded people and citizens.
Okay. What are those offenses that are likely to involve incarceration?
A lot of the more serious offenses involving firearms, as we've seen in the news during the pandemic, there are a lot of offenses that involve firearms, and even still today, there's mass shootings every weekend. It seems like there's something that happens. So firearms, we have to take those seriously because we have seen that these things can escalate when there's firearm involved. If there's like an aggravated robbery, which is basically with a firearm, you hold someone up. And if the firearm's involved in an offense and you're convicted of that offense, then that could carry mandatory time in the juvenile Department of Services, which is like the juvenile prison system. So something like that, if there's sometimes a rapes are very serious and taken serious, but a lot of times those children get treatment to try to help them out as well. But the more violent crimes, especially if they're involving weapons, are more the ones who would be considered to go into the Department of Services, the juvenile detainment system.
Okay. Yeah, in the case of truancy, and that's a situation for those of you who doesn't understand what truancy means, kids skipping school or not attending school. Are parents also held accountable?
Yes, when a school truancy is filed, they also file a failure to send against the parent. That is the law. So they have to file against a school truancy for the child and a failure to send against the parent. Because sometimes the child is not the one responsible. So if you have a younger child and the parent, and they're not getting to school, you look at the parent as far as that goes. But if you have like a 17-year-old and the school is 2 blocks away from their house, you're not going to want to have the parent charged. But the law, you have to, but the state can eventually dismiss that case when they proceed on the school choice for the child. So it's all a case-by-case scenario as to whether the parent is going to be liable or the child is old enough to be liable for themselves.
In situations where parents are held liable, what consequences do they face?
Usually they can be charged criminally at some point, but usually we try to get children's services involved. Someone to try to teach the parents, how to be a better parent, to how to be more involved in your child's life. And it's hard, because like I know that my mom was a single mother of 5 kids, working 2 jobs, 3 jobs, trying to keep food on the table, try to keep the lights on. So it's hard for parents. So what we try to do is try to get them services where they can learn to be a parent, and also they can continue to put the food on the table and pay the bills. It's hard, especially in the COVID area where a lot of people weren't working, schools, that you were going virtually or you were going in person, it's kind of up in the air. So this has been a particularly challenging year for schools and parents and the courts for the school truancy issues. But like I said, hopefully we can try to put services in place. Sometimes we can appoint a guardian ad litem who is an attorney that reports to the court what they think is best for the child. They're not the child's attorney, they're not the parent's attorney. They report to the court what's best for the child. They can do an independent investigation, try to help determine what the family needs to get the child back on track.
Yes. Yeah, talking about guardian ad litem, and situations like this. When I was a guardian ad litem, I had a 13-year-old who was charged with truancy, but then, it was reading at 2nd grade level. After my investigation, I discovered that this is a child from a single parent who is the eldest of 8 kids, lived in their home without furniture, without electricity. And, to him, school is the least of his problem, because all he thinks about is surviving, taking care of the family, was the man of the house. To cut the long story short, my recommendation was that this kid needs to be given, opportunity for him to really be a kid. There are a lot of situations like that has to do not really with the kid itself, but the environment in which they're being raised. So going to school at that point in his life was not a value system. The value system in that home is not education. So I'm sure you have situations like that in your courtroom every day. How is the system, addressing situations such as that, instead of just putting everyone on a blank slate, like, well, you got to go to school?
A lot of times, and that's why we appoint a guardian ad litem, so they can do these investigations, come up with this information like you did. And thank you, Emmanuel, for putting that out there. That's part of the guardian's job. And if you do find a case like that where a child is just basically trying to survive, and that's why they're missing school, anyone on the case who has information about this child and what they're going through can file a complaint for a abuse, neglect, dependency. At this point, it'd be either a educational neglect or a dependency. And with that filing, it takes it out of having the child charged with a crime of truancy, and it becomes a case where this child needs help because of the situation. And that's when we can get more children's services involvement, things of that nature, where it's not a criminal record hanging over a child's head. Even though school truancy is an unruly offense, it still comes with that stigma of being a criminal offense for a child. So hopefully one of the parties on the case, as a magistrate, you can't order anyone to file that, but hopefully someone who's trying to do what's best for the child, which is the guardian's job, and hopefully everyone on the case is also trying to do what's best for the child and family. They can file something such as a dependency cause of action and get services in place so that child does not have a school truancy following around.
Thank you. And most youth offenders are a product of their environment or their own life, or their own life. In situations where a child is charged with serious crime, does the court still appoint guardian ad litem to investigate the child's own life? And is that taken into consideration when it comes to sentencing, even when they are convicted?
Now, it's not mandatory that the guardian is appointed, but a lot of times it does take place because the more information we have as judicial officials, the better. So if we can get all this different information, then maybe that will help. It may not help with the charge itself sometimes because, the prosecutor has the purveyance to determine if they want to proceed on a certain charge or dismiss a charge or plead it down to something else. So it may not help at the charging phase of the criminal system, but it could help for sure during disposition. And in the juvenile system, we don't do sentencing because they're juveniles. We use some different terminology. It's called disposition.
Disposition.
Correct. So with disposition, that's once the case is adjudicated, then we can go on to hopefully have those things take place and be considered for the dispositional phase of the system, where we can consider all those things and try to help determine what's best to get this child back on track. Because once again, we're dealing with children, and hopefully the hope is that these children can be rehabilitated or be given services where they are not coming back to court time and time again with more serious charges. But sometimes you have to do what the law, as a judge or magistrate, you have to do what the law tells you to do. And if the child, once again, like I said, if you have done consultation, sometimes that comes a mandatory time, and you must instill that time.
Follow the law. You're currently running to become a judge of the court of the municipal court in Franklin County, which is going to be quite a transition for you from dealing with juveniles and youth to dealing with adults. What prompted you first to decide to seek to run for that position?
First, I think that because of my vast life experience from my past and my childhood to my legal experience being all sides of the courtroom as I have been, I think going to the municipal court system, which is, as you've heard, everybody says, people's court. Most people who come through the court system are coming to the municipal court. That's the contact people have, and I think that's a point where you can make a difference as a judge in the system. I think it's important for people to see someone like myself and be able to maybe see that there's someone who understands what they've gone through, what they've been through, what they're going through because of my history. Also, the other people who hopefully I'll be serving with on the bench, I can also, pass along my knowledge and my upbringing to the rest of the judiciary. So maybe the person not coming through to see me through my court, but they're going through another court system. A person having known me and knowing what I've gone through and knowing my background can hopefully understand even better the people coming through the system in front of them as well.
Okay. Yeah, for someone like you who grew up in an environment in which you are a product of a single mom with 5 other kids. Your family was on welfare. You grew up in low income housing, and at some point you were removed from your mom and placed with your uncle. So in a way, you had 3 older brothers who were part of the juvenile justice system. So in a way, you've been involved with the system since you were a kid. How does this experience inform your decisions on the bench as a magistrate?
As judicial officials, we have to follow law first and foremost, but we also have a variety of things that we can do. So I think that with my experience, I have a better understanding sometimes of where the people who come through the system are coming from. Their experiences may not be the same as the other people who are, may have had their cases if I wasn't sitting there. So I think that just with my understanding, I can hopefully help with the services that are being put in place, with talking to the people who are going to be working with these families, because with me having been there before, I know it's tough. And it's not always easy to just say, okay, I got to do this now. It's not like that. And especially with children that we're dealing with, you have to have a level of understanding and compassion as well. But at the same point, you must do your job and you must keep the community safe. That is part of your job as well, to make sure the community is safe. So it's a fine balance. And as I said, it's not easy, but that's why we're here, the judicial officials, because we believe we can make that balance to try to do what's best in keeping the community safe, but also trying to help people who need help.
Yeah. What makes you uniquely qualified now to become the judge of the municipal court as opposed to your opponent?
I don't know much about my opponent, but I speak for myself only. I'm going to keep being the person I am, whether I win this election, which I hope, or not. My personality, first off, because of my background. I've told you that already about where I come from and my family history and my legal background. I've been on all sides of the courtroom. I've done jury trials. I've been on murder trials. I've been a guardian ad litem. I've done divorce and custody. I've done OBIs. So I've had a wide variety of legal experience on all sides of the courtroom. Additionally, I just think the person I am underneath it all, I've always been a person who I just like talking to people, getting to know people, and treating everybody with respect. That's one thing the attorneys who come to my courtroom have told me time and time again, is that they really are impressed with the fact that I treat everyone with respect, no matter who you are, where you're from. It doesn't matter to me. I want to make sure that when you come into my courtroom, you don't feel disrespected. Now, sometimes, as a judicial official, if you are not respecting myself or the other people in the court, I have to let you know that that won't be tolerated. So that's part of the job. But at the same time, I don't like doing that. I want people to be able to think they're heard and respected when they come to the courtroom. Because whether you get what you want or not out of the system, if you feel that you've been respected and heard, that goes a long way.
Respect is key. So, what are those life experiences? I know you've had these diverse, unique life experiences, but then if you don't share with people, they wouldn't know. And every judge, every attorney comes to court with their life experiences in tow. What are those unique life experiences you had that you believe will aid you in becoming a fair, impartial, and a good judge?
And you asked that question, but I'm already on the bench as a magistrate for the last 5.5 years. So I'm already practicing what I am preaching. I'm already out there doing what I'm going to do when I become a municipal court judge, hopefully in the near future. So to me, it's not going to be a change, really. It's going to be a shift in the type of cases I'm dealing with, but it's not going to be a change in my philosophy and how I work and how I present myself on the bench.
Thank you. And as a juvenile growing up, we've talked about it, but we haven't talked about this particular aspect of it. You, at some point, had a stepfather who was an alcoholic and who was abusive. How did you survive that experience? And what was it like for you?
It was chaotic. Like most people who have substance abuse issues, when they are not under the influence, they can be really good people and be fun to be around and be loving and caring. But once they get to abusing the substances and they get intoxicated, it's like they become a different person. It's like a Jekyll and Hyde almost, where they're abusive to everyone around them, either physically, mentally. So it's a tough environment to be around because you want to respect and care for this person, and you get that back a lot of times until they are under the influence of substances, and it's a totally different person. So it really messes with your mentality when you think you care about this person, but then they can flip the switch and be someone who is very abusive to you and your family. So it's not an easy life to be around someone who's like that.
Mm. I'm glad you survived it, and you've done a great job of even turning things around. At some point too, you were placed in the care of your uncle and aunt. And do you think the placement or being removed and being placed in the care was that responsible for your eventual survival and the turn in the tide, which your life will have taken?
I think it was definitely responsible for making a partial change. Now, my older brothers and my sister, they've all made changes too. And as I look back to research, shows that as a child, you can do some things, but that get you into trouble. But most people grow out of that and become adults and mature and don't have those type of issues anymore. So my brothers and my sister, especially my sister, she's like one of my role models. She's the best people I know, smartest. I can't say enough about her. She's gonna cry when she sees this, but I tell her all the time that she's like a mother to me as well. She's my older sister. But I digress. You can grow out of that and do some other things, but by going to live with mom and aunt, I think that I saw more opportunities where I did not see before to grow and progress and do a lot of different things in my life that I may not have seen if I would have stayed, in the underprivileged type of housing and neighborhoods and things like that. It gave me a different perspective on life and opened my eyes to some things that I probably would not have seen. So I think by going into the custody of my uncle and aunt, that I it did lead the path me to go to higher education, to do some things as far as becoming a lawyer, or I thought about being a teacher. It helped me see some goals in the future that I didn't know were possible before.
That was awesome. And as we move closer to November, which is the election, what do you want people to remember you for when they are considering who to select or elect for that position you're vying for?
I want them to remember that I'm going to still be me. I'm still going to be Mike McAllister, the person who is going to do his best to follow the law, but I'm going to be fair. I'm not going to be judgmental. I'm a person who loves meeting people, talking to people. I talk to everyone. We at the parade today, Memorial Day parade. So we were walking, handing out candy, talking to people, but I stopped and talked to so many people that my whole entire parade was so far ahead of me that I could play catch up. And they always talk about me, that he talks to everybody. He can't stop. He just talks to people. I can't help it. That's who I am. I like talking to people. I like getting to know people. So that's who I am. That's who I'm going to be. I think that, when you see people and talk to people and learn things about people, you can know who they are without knowing every little thing about them. So I think that I'm going to continue to be me and continue to be someone who likes people. I find redeeming qualities in people, no matter what. That's just who I am.
Thank you. And if people wants to know more about you or wants to get in contact with you, where should they go? What number or email should they contact?
They can email me at mikemcallisterforjudge@gmail.com. They can go to my website, mikemcallisterforjudge.com. On my website, they have some information about myself. But if you want more information, I'm on Facebook, Mike McAllister for Judge, Instagram. There's all the ways you contact me, and I'll try to respond.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike, for coming on to Legal Angle. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm just happy to be where I am. Like I said, I didn't know doctors and lawyers growing up, so I think I'm just really humbled the fact that I'm in this position today to be able to talk to you and talk to the audience about me possibly being elected as a judge come November.
Thank you. Your life story is very compelling. It's an honor to have someone like you as a friend, as an attorney, as a magistrate, and you have displayed such humility and carried yourself with dignity, through the life, throughout the time that I've known you. And
Thank
thank
you.
you for coming on the show again. And for those of
Thank
you watching at home, thank you for joining us on this episode. Until next time, stay safe. God bless you.
Thank you all.